I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. My title today is Good versus Evil, and I'll be talking about the Bhagavad Gita, a book called Shantaram, and my theories. Julius Schoolafish, source of bountiful good recommendations, has done a review on his stack of a book called Shantaram. It's written by Gregory David Roberts, who he himself was in an Australian prison and escaped and spent 10 fugitive years in Bombay. This tells and fictionalizes, I guess, somewhat that story, but his life was so sensational that it doesn't need a lot of fictionalizing. Julius describes this as one of the half-dozen books that he'd take if stranded on a desert island, and I agree. It got me through 2 transcontinental plane flights, plus being stranded in a snowstorm at the Denver airport after missing my connecting flight by 1 minute. That says a lot. Julius also recommends a video series by a woman who calls herself PhilosophiCat, which is really fun to say. These are on the Bhagavad Gita and called The Song of God and Way of the Warrior. In an audacious move, I'm going to compare my theories of good versus evil to these monumental works of unsurpassed beauty. Function over form. The Himosphere and Horosphere. I've been talking recently about Russell Brand and driving away some of my most devoted commenters by arguing with them in that Denver snowstorm and maybe after an espresso martini. And asking myself, why am I so stubborn? Is Russell the hill that I am willing to die on? And the answer is no. Russell is not the hill I'm willing to die on. But love is the hill I'm willing to die on. And the opposite of love is judgment. Judging people as good versus bad. I think that there is a himosphere, the masculine side of the brain, and a horosphere, the feminine side, and that these have been twisted in our current reality, and that the masculine side has usurped the function of God, which is judgment. God only judges innocent, but I think that masculine side of the brain wants to judge people first as good or bad, and then to decide whether their ideas are right or wrong. The feminine side, I think, is polite and doesn't judge either people or ideas because it does not want to create conflict. In the unified mind, we would be, I think, not judging people, but judging ideas, and judging ideas based on how much they are not judging people. Love is seeing everyone as worthy of challenging their ideas. It doesn't accept those of our friends and reject those of our enemies. When we say we'll agree to disagree, it's really a way of seeing the other person as incapable of either understanding your point of view or of you seeing theirs. This is something that also requires a lot of rigor in terms of not being swayed by celebrity, wit, someone who has authority, someone who is credentialed, maybe someone who's famous or who's mentoring you. These are all things that we need to push back against and say, I'm going to maintain my objectivity no matter what. The guard dogma. But the most difficult temptation for me to resist is beautiful language. My heart is ambushed by a well-turned phrase. An elegant argument seduces me into wanting to say, yes, 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 that's right, and not ruin the moment with a churlish and boorish argument of logic. That is why I keep my dogma close. When John Carter's clever writing and original thinking lures me in, my dogma tugs me back to that dividing point of men being superior to women. And when Ice 9 brings in these fresh analogies and deep research that make me gasp in agreement, my dogma guards the road to blacks are degenerate by nature. My dogma is that I am no better than anyone else, and so I am not willing to see myself as superior or others as inferior to me morally. That always gives me a touching point, some place that I can go to ground and know that I am not just being lured in. The war against love? The Bhagavad Gita begins with Arjuna, the warrior prince, arguing with Krishna, who is the avatar of Vishnu, that it would be wrong for him to kill his relatives, and he will not do it. Now, PhilosophiCat is using a version by Stephen Mitchell, which I think is more of an interpretation than it is a translation. I'm going to read one here that is more literal. This starts, "With the destruction of the dynasty, the eternal family tradition is vanquished, and thus the rest of the family becomes involved in irreligion. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted, and from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vishnu, comes unwanted progeny. An increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life, both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performances for offering them food and water are entirely stopped. By the evil deeds of those who destroy the family tradition and thus give rise to unwanted children, all kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated. O Krishna, maintainer of the people, I have heard by disciplic succession that those whose family traditions are destroyed dwell always in hell. Alas, how strange it is that we are preparing to commit greatly sinful acts. Driven by the desire to enjoy royal happiness, we are intent on killing our own kinsmen." So it all comes back to the women. Without a strong dynasty enforcing the religion, the women will have sex or marry for love, and not within their own caste. Those children are unwanted, not by their fathers or mothers, but by the ruling caste. Those bastards, figuratively or literally, will stop giving food and water to their ancestors. They won't do community projects and family welfare activities. All the ancestors will go to hell. So that's why it's righteous and good to kill these kinsmen who are not subjugating the women, so you don't end up in hell. Does anyone else see a strong correlation here with the Torah, where the worst thing you can do is intermarry with the Canaanites? That's what God really hates, but all that killing is fine with him. Krishna's ventriloquist. Like the words of Yahweh, these have been imagined by men, and during the same time frame of the 1st or 2nd century BCE. This was a ruling theocracy and had political and religious power, and needed to have the both of those together so that someone's dharma was serving or protecting that ruling caste. PhilosophiCat reveals ways in which he seems to agree with this, where she says she doesn't believe that people would come back as another race. Now, I don't know what insider information she has about reincarnation or why that would seem to go against the natural order of things for her. She also says that someone may feel they had their dharma calling them to be part of the intellectual class, but they're stuck doing manual labor, or maybe they're called to be a warrior, but they're stuck doing a desk job. Funny how no one feels like their dharma is really to shovel shit like the lowest caste in India. The real question isn't whether killing is right or wrong, but why. In my philosophy, the only right use of power over others is to protect or give them power over themselves, to protect their sovereignty. In this case, the reason that for going to war is because women are taking sovereignty over their own sexuality and who they want to have children with, along with the lower caste. So it's really a war against love and against sovereignty. Evil is the source of all money. One of the great joys of the book Shantaram is that Gregory gets to put his philosophies in the mouths of so many interesting characters. One of my favorites is the Palestinian Khalid Ansari, whose family was killed in the Sabra and Shantia massacres. Of the many underhanded treacheries of Israel, this ranks among the top. After the Yom Kippur War, Palestinian fighters and their families retreated to Beirut, where they made their stand in the Shantia refugee camp. A ceasefire was negotiated so that soldiers could move back onto the battlefield and the women, children, and elderly would not be in the line of fire. And protection was extended for that. After the men left, taking their weapons, the IDF attacked and killed up to 3,500 people, and then hid the bodies, knowing that this was a war crime. I looked at Wikipedia, and it lies and says that this was done by the Lebanese, but the IDF failed to protect. Fortunately, Gregory knows better. Khalid Ansari is in charge of black market currency, which the main character Lynn is learning. Khalid delivers my favorite line of the book. People say that money is the root of all evil, but that's not true. It's the other way around. Money isn't the root of all evil. Evil is the root of all money. There's no such thing as clean money. All the money in the world is dirty in some way because there's no clean way to make it. If you get paid in money, somebody somewhere is suffering for it. So he just summarized my book in a nutshell, where I say we are trading in pieces of slave, that slavery has always backed our money, and that money was created in order to trick us into participating in enslaving others so that we could protect us and ours from that slavery. This is how it was then, and it is how it is now. The sin in the crime. The lord of the Bombay Mafia and surrogate father to Lynn, the main character, is Abdel Qadir Khan. He has many memorable speeches. One of them is this: wherever you go in the world, in any society, it is always the same when it comes to questions of justice. We concentrate our laws, investigations, prosecutions, and punishments on how much crime is in the sin, rather than how much sin is in the crime. For me, the opposite is true. For me, the most important thing is the amount of sin that is in the crime. You asked me just now why we do not make money from prostitution and drugs, as the other councils do, and I tell you it is because of the sin that is in those crimes. It is for this reason that I will not sell children or women or pornography or drugs. It is for this reason that I will not permit those businesses in any of my areas. In all of these things, the sin in the crime is so great that a man must give up his soul for the profit he makes. It's also Cotter who explains his theory of good and evil. After laying the foundation by explaining the Big Bang, he continues, the universe has a nature for and of itself, something like human nature, if you like, and its nature is to combine and to build and to become more complex. It always does this. If the circumstances are right, bits of matter will always come together to make more complex arrangements. And this fact about the way that our universe works This moving towards order and towards combinations of these ordered things has a name. In the Western science, it is called the tendency towards complexity, and it is the way the universe works. It is moving toward something. It is moving towards some kind of ultimate complexity. And that final complexity, that thing we are all moving to, is what I choose to call God. If you don't like that word God, call it the ultimate complexity. Whatever you call it, the whole universe is moving toward it. Anything that enhances, promotes, or accelerates this movement towards the ultimate complexity is good. Anything that inhibits, impedes, or prevents this movement towards the ultimate complexity is evil. Poetic injustice. How does Cotter's definition fit the determination of the sin and the crime? For instance, selling children into sex slavery seems like it could be interpreted as contributing towards greater universal complexity. It certainly would make their lives more complicated and maybe make them more complex people as a result than they would have been if they had lived a simple peasant life unmolested. Or what about the Shantaram massacre? Certainly Yahweh is a complex God, full of contradictions that those who do his bidding have to deal with, fraught with moral complexity. So I don't know that that really is a useful thing. I think that the rule of reciprocity, as I call what was the moral code for millennia and for cultures around the world, which is that if it is wrong for someone else to do to you, it is wrong for you to do to them. That would preclude things like kidnapping children into sex slavery, and definitely not the Shantaram massacre. Evil-doers need do-gooders, and vice versa. My definition of good and evil is that to do good is to alleviate suffering, but to do better is to enable people to alleviate their own suffering. And to do bad is to cause suffering, but to do evil, which is always a verb, never an adjective. You need to cause others to cause suffering. Great suffering is always authorized. There's always a social structure and an ideology that allows that. The real army isn't carrying weapons, they're carrying words. And they're the ones who buy into this simplistic dichotomy and expect society to then bear the burden of repairing the damage that has been done by the evildoers. And perhaps virtue even requires vice. If families and communities had the means to care for their own, that suffering would be something out of the ordinary. It would be an honor, perhaps, to be able to care for someone who was in need, to welcome the stranger, to feed the hungry, to especially give comfort to the dying, as Mark did recently for his friend Joan. In our case, it is more like this is a stick to be wielded to inflict guilt on those who are not doing the same. And maybe that accepting of that as a duty is something that keeps the cycle going, because it's not seen as something that is outrageous that this kind of suffering should be inflicted. Cotter also talks about how doing the right thing for the wrong reasons is worse than doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. And I found that very freeing, but I'd have to confess my wrongdoing in order to explain why. The infinite here, the eternal now. I'll end with a quote from A Course in Miracles from chapter 15, The Holy Instant. The reason this course is simple is that truth is simple. Complexity is of the ego and is nothing more than the ego's attempt to obscure the obvious. You could live forever in the holy instant, beginning now and reaching to eternity, but for a very simple reason: Do not obscure the simplicity of this reason, for if you do, it will be because only you prefer not to recognize it and not to let it go. The simple reason, simply stated, is this: the holy instant is a time in which you receive and give perfect communication. This means, however, that it is a time in which your mind is open, both to receive and to give. It is the recognition that all minds are in communication. It therefore seeks to change nothing, but merely to accept everything. So what would be the obstacle? What would prevent us from wanting that perfect communication? I think that is blame for other people, guilt for the fact that we think we're better than they are, and fear that they would not like us if they knew how we think about them. The forgiveness of others is just the baby steps to get to the big kahuna of forgiving ourselves. And if even one of us could fully forgive ourselves, I think it would zap along the neural synapses of the one mind until we all were in that holy instant of the eternal now and the infinite here. The full text of this, with all the links, will be at thirdparadigm.substack.com. And for more, here is the Bhagavad Gita and Palestine, and this is the Golden Rule Rant. Thank you for watching.